Yo, people, welcome back to On Track GP. Listen, it's the Mexican qualifying session that we're reacting to today, joined by Sam. Bro, first of all, how are you doing today? How are you feeling, man?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Yeah, all excited for tomorrow. Yeah, how are you?
I'm good. I'm a little bit perplexed, a little bit shocked. Didn't expect that result. I mean, I guess we'll go in order. We'll get to Q3 and that surprising result with Ferrari, but there was a shocking Q1 as well. Norris went out. I definitely didn't see that coming. Bit of a struggle for him. What did you make of that? And I mean, I guess, do you see him moving up the field with ease tomorrow? Because this is a tough track for him.
Yeah, it was a huge shock, really. I think McLaren have sort of been warning that this performance drop's going to come at some point. But I think what's most worrying for Norris is this wasn't really to do with the car. Like he first of all he had to be brought in because there was an issue with the car, so and then he made a mistake. Like it was his lap that he ruined, and then he quickly tried to get another lap in, but of course Fernando Alonso had the brought out the double yellows and they just ruined it for him, really. So yeah, hugely surprising because like we sort of think of Norris as like this established driver now, not a driver who makes too many mistakes. Like if there's someone like Logan Sargent or someone who's been on the grid for not that long, maybe we can understand it a bit more, even if it was Oscar Piastri. But the fact is, Lando, like he's been so good of late, like it was really surprising. Like you said, it's going to be a tough ask because this circuit isn't great for overtaking. It's got a huge straight, so maybe if you can get it done there, you'll be all right. But then it's got a lot of like tight and twisty corners, especially towards the last sector. So like it's going to be tough for him, but also we need to wait and see where he's going to start on the grid because another thing that happened in Q1 is just so many investigations. I think we've got Max has been investigated, George Ross has been investigated, like Hamilton's been investigated.
Hamilton
Like,
as well, yeah.
yeah, it's essentially a case of who's not being investigated. That'd be a quicker conversation to have. So, depending on where that sort of shakes down, where that ends up, like Norris could have a bit of a better position, but still, I mean, it's going to be very hard for him to continue his podium streak if he wants to do that.
Yeah, I mean, two cars going too quick, was it? One going too slow, or one too quick and two
Yeah,
too
it's quite
slow?
hard to remember. So we had first of all we had Alonso, Verstappen, and Russell going too slowly in the pits. So basically, we had this huge traffic jam of like if you
Yeah,
ever driven on a momotorway and no one lets you in, that's essentially
that's
what was
that's that's
happening.
basically
But
what. But do you know what really surprised me about that situation? I was listening to Jenson Button speak about it just after. Is that doesn't feel like it's allowed. I know he was trying to create a gap. He didn't want to be in dirty
mhm,
air, whatever. But you're not able to overtake in the pit lane, so you're just basically backing everybody else up, which is a
exactly, yeah.
massive, massive problem for everyone. It doesn't really seem fair. So sure, I don't know what the consequence is going to be, but it seems a bit
Yeah, so
unbelievable for Max.
what's happened usually is like they don't want cars slowing on tracks. So they've built in this thing saying, okay, you have to complete a lap by this time. Like it has to be a minimum lap time. But there's like a weird loophole where like it only starts when you reach a certain point of the track, and the pit lane isn't in that part of the track. So drivers just going to go really slowly, or in the case of Max and Russell, like just completely stop pretty much. So you're right, like it's sort of against the rules, but like it's a weird loophole. And like we've seen it before, like Verstappen did it in Singapore and he got away with a reprimand that time. But I think soon after the FIA were like, yeah, we shouldn't have really done that. Like it's a bit like VAR in football, like when they realize they've done it wrong, like
Yep.
it's like we're not going to use it as a precedent. So I wouldn't be surprised if all three of those drivers get some kind of grid penalty for Sunday.
Yeah, no, 100%. Sargent, obviously, as well, having a time deleted for a breaking track limits at turn 12. He was one of Ocon and Magnussen and Stroll, along with Norris, all going out of Q1.
Mhm.
What really shocked me with this, and obviously the result, but it was fine margins in Q3, but the surprise is the fact that Verstappen has been setting the fastest pace throughout the whole weekend so far. Didn't really seem to
Mhm.
have any issues. I think in the final of Q3, he did have the first attempt. He did have a hit off the curb. Maybe he took too much off it, and then he needed to go again. But I mean, with Q2 and then following with Q3, there's so many fine margins in qualifying in terms of picking your right moment. Yellow flags, and how much do you think that all played a part in the end result? Because it was just, I don't know if Ferrari just got a lucky break in the end. Because they could never match that time again when they tried to repeat it. They never shown any
Mhm.
signs of doing that beforehand in the previous qualifyings in 2-1 practice sessions and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that's the most confusing part. Like you said, like Verstappen's been top all three practice sessions, and like even then, it hasn't been Ferrari directly behind him. Like Alex Albon twice was second fastest. Mercedes have looked really good this weekend. Like, so if we were going to say which teams are going to challenge Verstappen, like you wouldn't have said Ferrari. They've just looked off the pace all weekend. Like they've looked like you put your money on them finishing seventh or eighth like that. So the fact this lap, not only did it come very late on, it came literally their final lap. Like it was crazy. They came out of nowhere. Like everyone thought, oh, Max is going to be on pole again because he's finished top. And then suddenly, like both Ferraris finished. Like, oh wow, like where have they come from? And it was quite interesting after the session. Like you could get a bit of the conversation between the two of them. Like Sainz and Leclerc were both like, what on earth has just gone on? Like what has happened? Like where's this come from? So obviously they'll know. There'll be some data they can read saying maybe we're really quick in this section. Like there'll be something maybe Ferrari can use. But like, yeah, it's just something that came completely out of the blue. And I think that's what made the qualifying session quite exciting. Like two Ferrari starting on the front row for the first time since Monaco last year. So it's been a long time for a team like Ferrari not to be locking out the front row. So yeah, the question now is obviously Charles Leclerc's got so many poles where he hasn't won. Like he's got a terrible conversion rate. So the fact that now two of them are starting on the front row, maybe that gives him a better chance. And maybe as well, if Verstappen gets a grid penalty as well, maybe their chance to get a bit improved. But yeah, qualifying wise, it was like a perfect day for them.
Yeah, crazy day at AlphaTauri as well. In Q2, we're starting to see signs of Ricciardo putting in serious laps. On the other hand, Tsunoda going out and hitting the rear jack of the Williams for Williams pit lane as well. He went out along with Gasly and Hulkenberg and Alonso. But with Ricciardo again, did he extract more pace out of the car than that actually you felt like that actually was, or did Tsunoda underperform? Because the pace that he was putting out there was ridiculous. I couldn't believe it. He was right up there with the best cars on the grid. He looked like as if he was potentially going to be, challenging them.
Well, yeah, I think this was like a classic example of teamwork in F1. Like, so we all know Tsunoda's got a new engine this week that he's pushed him over his limit, so he's going to get a grid penalty. He's going to start last. But rather than Tsunoda, like AlphaTauri saving the car and not sending Tsunoda out, they essentially made him like Daniel Ricciardo's wingman. So what they did is they ran him ahead of Ricciardo. So he basically created something called tow, which is when it's easier to follow, you get a bit of like a boost. Like if you ever play like Mario Kart or something like that, where you get a speed boost, it's essentially that, but less dramatic. And like he did that. And then obviously that happened for Q1 and Q2. Like Yuki didn't set a time during Q2 because I think they realized like there's not much point now. Like we've done as much as we can. And I think everyone will sort of wait for Q3 to see where like, okay, is Ricciardo quick without Tsunoda? And the answer is like an emphatic yes. Like I think he's P4 off the top of my head, like unbelievable finish for him. And I think having had the race that he had in the last race, comeback race in Austin, like I think a lot of people sort of looked down at that performance, but he did get damaged. I don't think it was that well known that he got damaged, hence why he finished so badly. He had a terrible strategy as well. He was on a one stop, which is again why he finished so low. So this is sort of the performance that he was definitely after. Like you're right, he just looked quick, and like there was generally a time where you thought, is he going to get pole here, or is he going to finish P2? Like, is he going to be on the front row? And like he was so quick all weekend. And I think again, I keep referencing these grid penalties, but if he has a couple of drivers ahead of him that get grid penalties, then he's got a great chance of not only finishing in the points, but like very high up in the points. Maybe a podium still a bit out of the reach, but getting on that upper echelon, if I can say it, P5 and above would be great for him, and like massively help the team at a time when they desperately need points.
Yeah, he's had some since coming back into F1, obviously from reserve driver at Red Bull. He's had some unfortunate weekends. Obviously, had the injury as well, so he was out when Liam Lawson took his place. For him to be in this position, and like you said, Q2, I was like, okay, maybe it is Tsunoda, and Tsunoda's not going to be there, in Q3, and he's definitely not going to be there in the race to kind of string you along. So what is the plan here? But then that pace that we just saw in Q3 was like, okay, wow, you've actually got something to you here. Vastly experienced driver, very, fantastic driver at his best as well. So I'm really looking forward to the race to see if he can continue that pace. It will be difficult. There's a lot of quick cars behind him, one of them being Perez. That is a tough one to take, I think, for the Red Bull second driver. Of course, I think his future is pretty much secure. It looked like, I mean, it's guaranteed. We already heard the announcement. Ricciardo's going to be driving for AlphaTauri next year. There won't be any move for him. And we saw earlier in this week, Liam Lawson was kind of questioning, where will my future be? I didn't really see this coming. But to be behind Ricciardo in the senior Red Bull car, that is embarrassing.
Yeah, I think embarrassing is fair. Like, especially in his home race, like every time that Perez goes out on the track, those Mexican fans go nuts. So to see him finish that low, and like, I think the most embarrassing thing is like this has just come like expected. Like, we're quite a way into this, and we've only just brought it up. Like, if it was Max finishing this low, it'd be like headline news kind of thing. Like, but now it's just sort of accepted. Like, he's always, I can't remember the last time he finished on the front row. I think it's been a long time since he got pole. I think way in the early of the season. So yeah, yeah, I don't know, like if it's confidence or I don't know if the car suits Max a bit more. But you're right. When the second team in AlphaTauri start beating you to like qualifying positions, then that's a real alarm bell or whatever. Like, yeah, it's a big problem. I
Ringing
think, like I
off.
said, yeah, Red Bull have sort of accepted that he's going to be there for next year. I think they don't really want to rock the boat too much. But if Ricciardo's doing that and Perez is doing that, like, it doesn't look good for him at all.
No, and it just comes after Lewis Hamilton was kind of defending him publicly and saying, it can be a stressful time in a high pressure situation in a team like that, and kind of
Mhm.
making little jabs and jibes about maybe these public, Lando Norris links, and that doesn't help the situation. I don't know. I think if you're going to drive for a car at the top end of the field, there is going to be pressure. You are going to get those rumors. You are potentially going to get scrutinized by your own bosses, in your team if you're not performing. I think the way that he's kind of performed this year, regardless of if the car is more in Max's favor, has been still, even for me, quite shocking because he's a very, very good driver, and we saw the quality from him, in the season before when Max went for the championship versus Lewis. So tough for Checo. Hopefully he improves because I do want him to do well at his home race, but that's not a great start. In fifth, obviously Verstappen, surprisingly, shockingly in third, starting as well on the second row, but the times were so close.
Mhm.
It was literally fine margins in Q3. Very little to separate. Do you still have Max as the overwhelming favorite in the race, despite being on the second row?
Yeah, I mean, currently now, so he's currently P3, but like I said, we've sort of got this grid penalty he's looming. Like, if he
Yeah.
gets another +3 and down to sixth, I still think he could do it. Like I
Mm.
mentioned before, it's not a great track for overtaking, but when your car's that much quicker, like he could easily get a few of them on the straight and like beat him into the corner. So yeah, I think I don't know, the further down he goes, the harder it's going to be. But I think if he's within the top 6, 7, like something like that, I think he's still sort of the favourite to get part on, because like we've seen, like it's been the quickest car in every session other than Q3. So like that shows it's got pace, that shows it's got performance. And I think he's had a fairly good time with it. Like you mentioned, he had a bit of an incident in Q2 or whatever it was, but other than that, he seems to be really comfortable with the car in control of it. So I think it's going to take a lot. Like I think Ferrari have to do some ultimate teamwork if they want to like try and stop Verstappen from overtaking early on. Whether
Yeah.
that happens, we'll see. But again, like if he gets a massive grid penalty and he's down near the back, and it's going to be very hard for him. But I think like yeah, top 7 and above, you still put him as your favorite.
Yeah. Mercedes as well. Hot and cold. I mean,
Mhm.
Russell was saying that at times they felt like they were putting out some really good times over the weekend, but they were never, for me, really going to come and challenge Max. I think the Ferraris maybe took them by a bit of surprise as well with their performance with that blistering lap that they put in, the two of them. And then there's some complaints about cold tires and maybe the timing of everything there. What did you make of Mercedes? Do you think they're just going to maybe be looking to collect solid points and keep it moving? Probably not going to pull up any
Yeah, I think
trees.
that was probably quite a disappointing Q3 for them. I think early on it looked like Russell was going to be the driver that was going to do better, but then Hamilton really came alive in Q2. Like he finished above Max, even though Max did one lap less. But yeah,
Mm.
it was looking like Hamilton could be the way. And like I said, they both just sort of fell away in the final session. I don't really know the reason behind that, if they had mistakes or like you said, this is quite a difficult track for traffic. Like it's so short. I think it's the third shortest circuit on the calendar. So like your engineers have really got to be on it, like when they send you out, like in case you run into anyone. And if you've got another driver who's like parked at the end of the grid, like that's not great for you. Like that's going to
Yeah.
ruin your day. So like there's a lot of things to get right. It can go wrong. And I think maybe the last few years since they started winning, like Mercedes has sort of like become a bit undone in that regard. Like their operations seem to be a little bit shaky at times. Like their pit stops aren't great. Like
No.
we've seen Hamilton moan quite a lot about the team's choices, especially with regards to
Strategy
traffic.
last
And
week. Yeah.
yeah, like it just seems when they don't have a winning car, like the other bits start to look a lot worse. And I think
Mm.
that's coming to the forefront. We don't really hear like Red Bull. Like when was the last time we heard about Max moan about traffic? Saying that I think he did
Yeah.
it once in this session, but on the whole, it's
Yeah.
fairly all right. Whereas Mercedes seem to have quite a lot of these issues. So yeah, it was just a track that's really hard to get a good clean run without having another 19 cars either very close behind you or directly in front of you.
Yeah. Before we get to obviously the lead cars, I want to give a very big shout out to Alfa Romeo. I mean,
Hmm.
two cars in the top 10. Alex Albon's time deleted. I didn't expect them to do anything in Q3 to better that, but just to be in the top 10 in itself is fantastic. To be in with an opportunity for points. Do you think they'll be able to? Do you think they'll be able to get one of those cars in the points, or do you see them naturally falling away in this race?
It's difficult. I think weirdly, like I remember at the start of the season, we're seeing that Alpha's one of those boring teams, and suddenly they've become like one of the most interesting because like
Yeah,
it's completely random where they're good at. Like you can't look at any of their circuits and go like, okay, they're clearly quite good at these kind of tracks. Like it's a complete lottery, and they were like, yeah, we're gonna be quick today.
yeah,
So yeah, they were really good. Like Bottas in particular was really quite quick, and can they get points? I mean, there's obviously a lot of good cars behind them. Like they've got the Alpines behind them, they've got Norris as well behind them. Like you might want to say like maybe one, like maybe they hang on to that last spot, especially Sonoda, who sort of challenges for that P11 quite often, is right at the back. So
yeah,
I mean, we don't know. Like it's a better place to be in is to start in the points and try and fight back or defend them at least, rather than trying to fight forward. But I think there's a lot of cars. Alex Albon as well is obviously starting behind them. Like there's a lot of cars really fighting for those last 2 or 3 spots on the points, and
mm,
I think Alpha's going to need a lot. They're going to need a really good race and not just one lap of performance to sort of hang on to that. So we'll see. But I think this might have been their best performance, really.
yeah. One team that are under serious pressure will be Ferrari. 2 cars front row, doesn't really get better than that. The strategy tomorrow is going to have to be on point. They're going to have to work together to defend against Max. At least have one car leading the race for me. Obviously, I think it's being obvious, leading the race going into turn 1, and then if one other car loses out, then they've got him sandwiched. But do you have confidence in Ferrari to put it all together and actually,
Uh,
put the final? Because Ferrari are one of these teams where they've shown good qualifying pace, at times recently. They've been able to surprise us in that way. But in terms of, I can never trust them to not make mistakes during a race, whether it's strategy, whether it's pit lane, whether it's driver, as well. Uh, will it all come together for one of them? Because it did for Science one time.
Yeah, I think the word strategy probably sends a shiver down any Ferraris fan's spine. Like they're just routinely bad at it. Like, we saw it
Mm,
last race. Charles started on pole. They for some reason put him on the one stop. Everyone else, even his own teammate, was on a 2 stop, and it went much better for them. Like it's like you can't like win the race before it's even started, but you can definitely lose it. Like
yep.
they really need to make sure like we've done the homework. We know what we're going to do. We know how the tires are going to behave. This is definitely the best strategy, because if they send them out on a terrible strategy, like you shot the drivers in the foot. Like there's nothing more
Mm,
they can do. Like Leclerc couldn't have done anything last week. Like that was the maximum he could have got out of that strategy. So I think it really depends on if they nail it in that regard. Like of course they're quick and they've got 2 good drivers, and like you said, like because they're starting so close to each other, they can really help each other. We saw Sainz using that to his advantage. Granted, it wasn't with Leclerc; it was with Norris, sort of getting him in their DRS
yep.
window and just really protecting his lead in Singapore. So if he can do something like that again tomorrow, or we can work with Leclerc and like hold off the rest of the team, then yeah, they obviously got a chance. Like they're starting from pole in the Ferrari, so but it's a big if whether that strategy, whether they nail that, and then if that's done, then yeah, you'd sort of back their drivers to have at least a chance. I mean, Verstappen in this year has sort of been all dominating, other than that one race. Like it's very hard to back against him, but I think Leclerc could do something, Sainz could do something. Like hopefully for them they can do, but like I said, strategy, get strategy right, and then we'll see.
Yeah. That reminder on Science was good, because that's probably one of the, outside of Verstappen, of course, he had some great performances, but Science, that was one of the most intelligent, composed performances I've seen from a lead driver. You think you just put the foot down and just, race your heart out
Mhm.
in that position. You're so stressed to try and get that win, especially, a Red Bull team that have been so dominant, and to just manage that gap with Norris was very impressive. So if they can put together one of them that type of performance, then we could be in for a good race. At least I just want it to be competitive. If Verstappen is
Mhm.
eventually going to be the winner in the end, at least make it drag on and make it a little, have some jeopardy there. Make Red Bull pit lane actually think about this before
Mhm.
giving them surrendering. What's your prediction if I was to ask for one in the top 3 for
Ooh,
tomorrow? And I know it's difficult because you don't know the penalty situation as well and
yeah, yeah.
investigation.
So
So
bearing like aside from like a massive max like minus 20 places start at the back of the grid, like I'm still going to go for him to win, and I'm going to say both Ferraris on the podium. So I'm going to go
okay.
Verstappen first, Leclerc second, Sainz third. It's going to be my prediction.
I can hear that. Yeah, I don't see too much from Mercedes, and I hope I'm wrong, but I just
Mhm.
don't get the feeling. I mean, Lewis usually performs really well here, and he just looks a shadow of the previous cars. So, guys, that's been your predictions there. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you smash up the likes. That was your qualifying review. The race is tomorrow. The watch along is tomorrow. There, it's very very interesting grid. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, it can continue. Just at least keep it interesting. Like I said. Until next time, big up your damn selves. In a bit, people. Peace.